Welcome to the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu. Today we are doing a deep dive into the world of insights.
Okay.
And not just any insights, but the kind that change the way you make decisions,
Right.
the kind that spark innovation and
Yeah.
drive personal growth. The book we're exploring is Seeing What Others Don't: The Remarkable Ways We Gain Insights. It's by Gary Klein. And it is relevant to all of you listening today,
Okay.
whether you are a leader, an entrepreneur, or just someone who wants to grow. So think of this as your express route to the core wisdom of this book and to understanding how these insights are made, all in this deep dive. From the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu.
This deep dive is based on the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu, and it should give you a clear and concise understanding of the remarkable processes that produce insight.
Okay, let's jump into chapter 1. It's called Hunting for Insights. And Gary Klein, who is a cognitive psychologist renowned for his work on decision making, tells us about how his interest in insights actually came from a seminar question. It was, how can we boost the up arrow of insight instead of just focusing on reducing errors?
So that's a huge shift in perspective. We always focus on the negative,
Yeah.
trying to fix what went wrong. And he recognized the equal importance of fostering breakthrough thinking.
Yes.
That propels us forward.
Exactly. And to illustrate this, he shared 5 real-world stories
Okay.
of unusual discoveries. The first story is about a young police officer.
Yeah.
He notices a driver ashing a cigarette in a brand new BMW. And this insignificant detail triggers the officer to think, maybe this car is stolen?
Wow.
That's the power of observation, leading to a rapid-fire realization.
Amazing.
The second story is about Martin Chalfie.
Okay.
He's at a lecture, listening to something about jellyfish bioluminescence, which is not his field at all,
Yeah.
but something sparks in his mind. And he connects this jellyfish bioluminescence to the idea of using what's called green fluorescent protein,
GFP.
GFP, in transparent worms for his research.
Wow.
And so it just goes to show you how a seemingly unrelated idea can collide with what you're working on to create something groundbreaking.
Yeah, you never know where that next piece of information will come from.
Yeah.
That will make everything click into place.
Exactly. Our third story takes us into the world of finance
Okay.
with Harry Markopolos. Back in 1999, he started seeing irregularities in Bernie Madoff's reported investment returns.
Oh, wow.
Now, this wasn't just a hunch. His expertise in finance allowed him to spot contradictions in the numbers that others just missed for years. Expertise is so important.
It is.
It's not just about the facts and figures, but it's also about developing a sense when something deviates from the pattern and understanding the underlying principles enough to recognize the inconsistency.
That's deep.
Our next story is about Michael Gottlieb.
Okay.
He was a doctor at UCLA in the early 1980s. He started to notice a troubling pattern: immune system failures appearing in his gay male patients. It was a gradual identification of a pattern, driven by his curiosity. This led to the initial understanding of what we now know as AIDS. And so it's a reminder that insights don't always arrive as a thunderbolt. Sometimes they emerge more slowly through a dedicated process of gathering data, noticing trends, and being persistent in your questioning and observations.
Very cool.
And lastly, Klein shares a personal everyday insight.
Okay.
He realized that to streamline getting his car repaired, he could simply leave a spare key with his mechanic. So insights can be small, practical discoveries that make your life easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's insight in action
Hmm.
in your daily life.
When Klein analyzed all of these diverse stories, he found that there was no common script for how these insights happen. So this was a challenge to some of the traditional models,
Now.
like Graham Wallace's idea that there's always a distinct preparation stage before the insight. So in many of these examples, the insight seemed to just come out of nowhere.
You just have to be ready for it.
Yes, and so Klein offers 5 steps to actively hunt for insights.
Okay.
First, make a conscious effort to collect observations regularly.
Makes sense.
Second, engage with positive psychology concepts, like thinking about strengths and possibilities. Third, start asking provocative what-if type questions. Fourth, pay attention to real-world contexts. And lastly, reflect on your personal experiences. These are all things that you can start doing today to become more attuned to potential insights.
I like it.
All right, now let's move on to chapter 2, the flash of illumination. In this chapter, Klein explores Graham Wallace's 4-stage model of insight.
Okay.
Now, this comes from Wallace's 1926 book, The Art of Thought, and it outlines insight as happening in 4 steps:
Okay.
preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. So first you consciously work on a problem.
Reparation.
Yeah, then you let it sit in your unconscious.
I-
Then you have your aha moment.
Illumination.
Then you test it out.
Verification.
But Klein challenges how well this model actually aligns
Oh,
with those
yeah.
real-world examples that we just discussed. There wasn't always a period of intense preparation, and the incubation period wasn't always a long, unconscious process. He even questions whether the flash of illumination is the insight itself or just an emotional peak that comes with it.
So that's interesting to think about, because we often think of that aha moment as the insight itself. But he's saying that that might not be the case.
Exactly. And so Klein proposes his own definition of insight.
Okay.
And it's an unexpected shift to a better story about how things work.
I like that.
And this shift isn't just intellectual. It affects how you understand things, how you act in response, how you perceive the situation, and even your emotions and desires.
It was like a more holistic
Yeah.
shift in your entire being.
Yes. Now, to steady insight, Klein took a naturalistic investigation approach, which
Wow.
was inspired by his work looking at firefighters and how they make decisions under pressure.
Oh, wow.
So he became more interested in studying how insights occur in real-world contexts rather than in those artificial settings of a lab.
That makes a lot of sense.
So for you to try to cultivate the flash of illumination, Klein suggests you take 5 steps.
Okay.
First, study those historical models of insight.
Like Wallace's.
Yeah. Second, analyze real-world examples.
Okay.
Third, question the idea of unconscious processes. Fourth, redefine what insight means to you. And lastly, embrace naturalistic observation.
Wow.
So just pay attention to the world around you.
I like it.
Now let's discuss Chapter 3, Connections. Here, Klein introduces the first pathway in his triple path model.
Okay.
And it's making connections between seemingly unrelated ideas or events.
This is about associative thinking,
Yeah.
right? Your ability to see those links in relationship.
Exactly. So to illustrate this, he gives 3 examples.
Okay.
First, consider Isoroku Yamamoto, the Japanese admiral, who, after observing the British attack at Taranto, made a connection to the potential vulnerability of Pearl Harbor.
Oh, wow.
And this tragically reshaped the thinking in World War II.
This is a huge example of how connecting an event in one context to another situation can lead to insights that change the course of history.
Exactly. Then we have Alison Gopnik's broccoli goldfish experiment.
What?
It revealed insights into infant minds and the theory of mind. And so this is really an example of experimental design, revealing hidden links.
And so this is about how carefully designed experiments can really help you uncover these hidden connections
Yeah.
between behavior and cognitive processes.
Exactly. And finally, we have Charles Darwin.
Okay.
Over years of observation, during his voyage on the HMS Beagle, he gathered a huge amount of data, but it wasn't until he connected his observations to Thomas Malthus's essay that he was able to formulate his theory of natural selection.
Wow.
So this just shows you how those groundbreaking frameworks can be built up over time by connecting different pieces of information.
Yeah, Darwin's journey is a testament to persistent observation and the importance of synthesizing diverse information into a new understanding.
Yes. And Klein introduces 2 concepts that play a role in these connection-based insights.
Okay.
First, non-dots,
Jan dots.
which are those overlooked elements that suddenly become important when you make a connection. And the second concept is anti-dots,
Anti-dots.
which are those pre-existing assumptions or beliefs that block you from seeing connections. And it's really valuable to understand these
It is.
because you become aware of what you might be missing and what might be limiting your thinking.
I agree.
So to cultivate these connection-based insights, Klein gives 5 steps.
Okay.
First, gather diverse observations.
Right.
Second, seek out unrelated contexts.
Okay.
Third, challenge existing assumptions. Fourth, notice those overlooked details. And lastly, take the time to combine different ideas.
I love these. These are all great strategies to expand your thinking.
Now on to Chapter 4, Coincidences and Curiosities. This is the second pathway in Klein's triple path model.
Okay.
And here the focus is on insights, triggered by noticing something unexpected.
Oh, coincidence.
Yeah. Or by pursuing your curiosity.
Oh, cool.
And in this chapter, we get 6 stories. The first is about Jocelyn Bell Burnell and her discovery of pulsars. She noticed an unusual signal in the data from her telescope, and her curiosity led to the discovery.
Wow.
So even in highly technical fields, just a sense of curiosity can lead to a breakthrough.
Yeah. You really have to embrace that curiosity.
Then there's the story of Leroy Butler,
Okay.
a Green Bay Packer, During a Super Bowl game,
Oh, wow.
he repeatedly noticed a particular play being run by the other team, and this led him to anticipate the play at a crucial moment and make a game-changing interception.
Amazing.
So even in high-pressure situations, maintaining an awareness of patterns
Yeah.
can yield those tactical advantages.
You had to be paying attention to what's happening.
Yes. We also have Alexander Fleming, his accidental discovery of penicillin.
That's a classic.
It was a chance contamination of a Petri dish with mold, and because of his open mind and his willingness to investigate, this led to one of the most important breakthroughs in history.
That's incredible.
Then we have Wilhelm Röntgen's discovery of X-rays. He was experimenting with cathode rays and noticed a fluorescent screen across the room glowing. And rather than sticking to his planned experiment, he was curious about this phenomenon, and that led to the revolutionary technology of X-rays.
Wow, so it's better to follow the data sometimes instead of sticking to your rigid plan.
Exactly. Next, we have Russell.
Oh.
He observed a silicon sample generating electricity when exposed to light, and this led to the first silicon solar cells. So this shows that even minor coincidences can lead to huge technological advancements.
It could be hard to know what's going to be a big deal and what's not.
Yes. And lastly, we have two parallel stories.
Okay.
Barry Marshall, discovering the link between H. pylori bacteria and stomach ulcers, and Carlos Finlay, who linked yellow fever to mosquitoes. And so both of these researchers faced huge skepticism, but their persistent curiosity about patterns led to paradigm shifts.
Wow.
So they trusted their own observations and challenged those established beliefs.
Really powerful.
And so to harness this power of coincidences and curiosity, Klein has 5 steps for you. First, stay alert to anomalies.
Anomalies.
Yeah, those things that don't quite fit. Second, pursue intriguing oddities. Third, link those observations to broader contexts. Fourth, test your hunches. And lastly, persist even when you face skepticism.
I love these.
All right, moving on to chapter 5, contradictions. This is the third pathway in Klein's model.
Okay.
And it's when insights are sparked by noticing contradictions or inconsistencies. And we get several examples related to the 2008 financial crisis.
Okay.
We hear about Steve Eisman and John Paulson. They saw the contradictions in the subprime mortgage securities ratings. Their ability to see these inconsistencies led to financial foresight.
Oh, wow.
So being able to see the inconsistencies can give you an advantage.
That's a huge advantage.
Especially in complex situations.
Yes, especially in complex situations.
We also learned about Michael Burry, Greg Lippman, and Gene Park. They identified contradictions in the mortgage data and the rising default rates. But even though they all saw the contradictions, their actions and outcomes differed. So identifying a contradiction isn't always enough.
You have to be willing to act on it.
Yes. Then there's the story of Meredith Whitney.
Okay.
She predicted Citigroup's dividend cut because of contradictions in their earnings reports.
Oh, wow.
So she had a skeptical mind and challenged even those seemingly solid financial institutions.
This is independent thinking at its finest, and the courage to voice those dissenting opinions.
Then we have John Snow and his work on the cause of cholera. He saw a contradiction in the prevailing theory when he mapped those cholera cases in London and saw they were clustered around a specific water pump.
So he meticulously examined the inconsistencies, and that changed our understanding of how diseases spread.
Exactly. And finally, we have Albert Einstein's theory of special relativity.
Quite.
It arose from a contradiction in physics regarding the speed of light. And so his willingness to grapple with this contradiction led to a revolutionary shift
Wow.
in our understanding of space and time.
So sometimes the most profound insights come from questioning everything, even the foundations of what we think we know.
Exactly. And so to help you leverage contradictions to gain insights, Klein gives 5 steps.
Oh.
First, cultivate a sense of skepticism. Second, spot those inconsistencies.
Right.
Third, trace the contradiction back to its source. Fourth, shift your existing story based on what you found. And lastly, act decisively on your new insight.
Powerful stuff.
Okay, moving on to chapter 6, creative desperation. Trapped by assumptions. That's the 4th pathway. And it focuses on insights that emerge from desperation. So when all the conventional approaches have failed.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes. And Klein gives 5 stories here.
Okay.
First, the story of Wagner Dodge, who set an escape fire during the Man Gulch wildfire. So in this life or death situation, he had to abandon conventional wisdom to survive, and it saved his life. So sometimes you have to rethink your entire approach to find a truly novel solution.
That's intense.
Then there's the story of Aaron Ralston, who was trapped in a canyon and had to amputate his own arm to survive.
Oh my God.
It just shows the power of necessity and the ability to act on a truly radical idea.
Yeah, when you're in that situation, you can do amazing things to survive.
We also hear about Cheryl Kane,
Okay.
who had a problem with collecting time cards, and her suggestion was to use Hershey's Kisses.
Oh, that's funny.
So even in everyday situations, you can use creative desperation to
Yeah.
find unconventional fixes.
I like it.
And then there's the story of David Charlton
Okay.
at Corning Incorporated,
Oh.
who had to solve the problem of scratched turbine blades. And this pressure drove him to a breakthrough. So real-world constraints can fuel that innovative thinking.
Very cool.
And finally, Napoleon Bonaparte at the Siege of Toulon.
You're right.
He had a strategic challenge, and he repositioned his cannons to forge a new strategic path. So even in high-stakes situations, those feelings of being trapped can lead to innovations.
Yeah, you have to be willing to discard those old assumptions
Yeah.
when you're facing a really difficult problem.
And to help you trigger those insights, through creative desperation, Klein has 5 steps.
Right.
First, recognize when you're trapped. Second, embrace the pressure.
Yeah.
Third, challenge your core assumptions. Fourth, experiment with radical solutions. And lastly, act swiftly when the insight hits.
Yeah, it's a good plan.
Now, Klein points out that these 4 pathways, connections, coincidences, contradictions, and creative desperation, form his triple path model, which he'll delve into more in Chapter 8.
Okay.
Now let's move on to Chapter 7. Different ways to look at insight. Here, Klein encourages you to consider how insights actually occur and to move beyond just the specific triggers.
Okay.
He starts off by using a metaphor,
Okay.
the Mayweather-Hatton boxing match.
Oh, wow.
He points out that insights can be gradual, just like a boxer figuring out his opponent's weaknesses over time. So it's not always an aha moment. It can be a process of understanding.
That makes sense. It's about those subtle shifts in perception and adapting your approach.
Yes. And Klein contrasts the way insights are studied in labs versus how they happen in real life.
Okay.
So in the lab, the focus is on those aha moments, in puzzles. But in the real world, insights emerge in more complex and messy ways.
Yeah, you can't really control for everything in the real world.
Exactly. He also introduces some alternative perspectives, like Stephen Johnson's slow hunches,
Like hunches.
and Danny Kahneman's System 1 and System 2 thinking. And so this just shows you that there are multiple ways to think about insight.
Yeah, there's not just one right way to think about it. They all offer valuable pieces to the puzzle.
Exactly. Now, Klein redefines insight as an unexpected shift to a better story. And he says it encompasses those aha moments and those gradual insights that happen over time.
Okay, so it's more inclusive.
Yes. And so to explore these different ways of looking at insight, he suggests 5 steps.
Okay.
First, observe insights in action. Second, compare lab insights to real-life insights.
Right.
Third, study those slow hunches. Fourth, pay attention to your intuitive triggers. And lastly, redefine insight based on these different perspectives. Now let's move on to Chapter 8, the logic of discovery. Here, Klein presents his triple path model as a unified framework. He takes the 4 triggers: connections, contradictions, and creative desperation, and puts them into 3 pathways: connections, coincidences, and contradictions. And he says that the 2 key elements of this model are anchors, which are the new beliefs or actions that emerge from an insight,
Anti-dots,
which are the discarded beliefs and assumptions.
So it's about the shifts in our thinking.
Yes. And Klein illustrates this model by showing how it applies to Marshall's ulcer insight and his own realization about his car key.
Oh, that's cool.
So it shows that it can be applied to science and everyday life.
You have broad applicability.
And he contrasts the triple path model to Wallace's 4-stage model to show that his is more dynamic and context-driven, which he believes is more accurate.
Yeah, I think he's right. It's a more realistic model.
And so to apply this logic of discovery, Klein gives 5 steps.
Okay.
First, identify those insight triggers. Second, map out the anchors and the antidots.
Yep.
Third, seek diverse contexts. Fourth, contrast this to the traditional models. And lastly, focus on boosting the up arrow. Okay, now I move on to Chapter 9, which is called stupidity.
Stupidity.
Yeah, but he's not using this word. To imply a lack of intelligence, expert speaker,